Thank you everybody for coming. As you can see, even though the Morrison government is gone, and even though, thank Christ, Peter Dutton is no longer the minister, and even though the Moore-Guppin family are back in Biloela, there's still a lot in the refugee space to fight for. Our demands for this rally were for permanent protections for all, permanent visas for all, to close down the offshore detention centres and bring those people here, to increase the refugee intake coming from Afghanistan by 20,000, and scrap the so-called fast-track processing system and have a fair system of processing for all, and start resettling some of the refugees abandoned in Indonesia. Sometimes our tasks can seem quite daunting, but it's important that you are here standing up for human rights. Yesterday, we were reminded about how toxic the politics around the refugee issue is in Australia. It was revealed that during the election campaign, Scott Morrison's campaign staff tried to pressure Australian Border Force officials into releasing information about boats arriving from Sri Lanka to Australia. For 8 years, we were told that boat arrivals would not be revealed, that this was an on-water matter. All of a sudden, Scott Morrison wanted this information released, and he wanted it released because he wanted to whip up fear and racism and try to get re-elected on that basis. You know, this is the rotten politics that exists around the refugee issue, and that's why it's important that you are here today standing up for refugee rights. And we shouldn't forget too that we've had some success, and we shouldn't forget how those successes came about. They came about because ordinary people like yourselves mobilised. Morskin Shamsalipur would still be in a detention centre in Darwin today if the local community had not mobilised. In 2015, Peter Dutton wanted to send a baby recovering from burns, baby Asher, back to Nauru and back to a harmful environment. But again, the people mobilised. Unionists and community members held a vigil outside the Lady Salento Hospital and forced Peter Dutton to back down. In 2019, all the children on Nauru were taken from Nauru and brought to Australia. Now, how was that achieved? Again, people mobilised. People who worked at the detention centres began to speak out. They spoke at public meetings, at rallies, to the media, and they told us what was happening on Nauru. For example, they taught us what resignation syndrome was, a syndrome that made children on Nauru lifeless and unresponsive. People signed petitions and attended rallies. Nurses and doctors stood outside hospitals with signs saying detention harms children, and teachers again went on strike. That's how we got the children off Nauru. The Moore-Guppin family too are now back in Biloela, but it wasn't because of the Labor government that got them there. It was the Home to Biloela, the Home to Bilo campaign. They spoke to the media. They initiated the petition that had more than 100,000 signatures on it. And they visited Christmas Island and kept the spotlight on that family. And they humanised the family. And that's what got those people back to Biloela. And that's what we've got to do now. It would be a fatal mistake for us to sit back and think that Labor will make the changes we need. They won't. They are still committed to Operation Sovereign Borders and turning back boats. They will not act unless they are pushed. Change comes from below, and that's why we have to keep mobilising. Thank you all for coming.